the floor is now open for Q&A. Please, if you have a question, a comment, or a contribution to make, kindly raise your hand up. I will call you to unmute yourself. Please keep your questions or contributions or comments very brief. So while the audience are trying to articulate their question or make their contribution, I have a question for you, Professor Mortalino. So during your lecture, you talked about community and rest of them, and you talked about mindset being a decisive factor in the material condition of a country. You gave the example of developed and underdeveloped. So I'm just curious to know whether the communal mindset you talked about while discussing Africa is actually what made them to be categorized as an underdeveloped country. I just want to know your thought on this. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's not a straight relationship. So there's no straight correlation between moments of underdevelopment on the African continent and it being committed to communalistic orientations. However, the deeper philosophical significance of my point is that communalism or communitarian ideologies tend to commit people to a certain value system. And this value system may have implications for innovation. Communalism tends to promote consensus and it suppresses dissent. In fact, it may condemn those who do dissent as having failed at the project of personhood. And if all people are seeking to be accepted, one must just understand that there is a promotion of certain values, and the promotion of those values may have implications for the development of a mindset, and that mindset may be able to take people from one place to another, or it may hinder such a move. That's my claim. It's a philosophical claim. It's not a yeah, it's not a material claim.
Okay, thank you very much for this response. I can see a hand up here. Please, Dr. Abo, you can unmute yourself and ask your question or make your contribution. Please remember to keep it brief and let our speakers also keep their responses brief. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to both Professor Ben and Professor from Beirut. I share a lot of agreement with many of the things that Professor Bernard said, especially the fact that development is essentially mental. I have defended it severally, and I think it is very correct to believe that material development is more like an epiphenomenon of development, of mental development. My concern actually with his presentation is in the example that he gave about the Pope and the way the Pope excluded Africa from what he originally said. And I was actually thinking that that should have actually been a support for what Professor Bernard is defending. But he now looks at it as a degeneration. And I'm curious to know how he can expand that. And then as a question, I also want to ask, in the movement from one station to the other, which I believe is, he's using station because I think he's interested in physical, maybe, I don't know whether he's interested in physical, I don't know the context in which he's in this situation, but how much of the past, if you are to share it in percentage, because you seem to agree that development will come when we move to the next station with less and less of what was in the past station. For example, how can somebody who saw me when I was 5 years recognize Joseph now that I am an adult? How much of my past has been retained? Will it get to 1% or what? I just want to see what you can reduce it to before development can be fostered. And also because it will help to also bring into place what the Afrofuturism that was discussed by the second presenter, how Africa think about 100 years, 200 years to come, like other countries. Is it because our past appears to be clogging our present? And I think that Professor Bernard had a very shortened understanding of African communalism, because African communalism does not deny individualism. Thank you.
I can respond.
Please go ahead, Prof.
Okay, I'll start with the last remark. Part of the propaganda of communalism is to claim that it promotes individualism. But when you push it, like really when you push it, you find even amongst young scholars the popularization of Menkiti. So it's just for me it's just a propaganda ploy. Now coming to the traces and the movement from one station to the next, like I said, it's not going to be a linear movement with clear-cut moments of disjuncture or rupture between the past and the present. It is a very difficult type of movement, which involves revolutions in thinking. It's I do not think it's evolutionary at all. It is quite revolutionary. People may have to turn on their own ideas and on their own societies and introduce new systems of thought. Of course, those new systems of thought will be negotiated with resistant and existing systems of thought. And in that negotiation, there will be some kind of settlement, the Hegelian Marxist kind of thinking about how ideas and material conditions evolve. So I do not think it is going to be a straight thing, but it is going to be dynamic. But the movement then happens in the deliberate clashing of ideas, which sometimes I do not think I see in Africa. Coming to the Pope and Africans, I don't quite follow that question, but I thought that it represented a moment of degeneration in that Africans were excluded from being expected to participate in this discussion by virtue of their invocation of traditionalistic claims about what the essence of being African is. That was my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your response. So, Professor Olivia, please unmute yourself, ask your question, and make your contribution. Please keep it brief. Thank you.
Yes, can I just come back? Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
You can hear me well. Okay. Bernard, can I just come back to what you're suggesting? I like it. I like the idea of mindsets, and I think that is useful to think about, the possibility of university shared concept, that kind of debate. If we can identify mindsets, surely we can also identify concepts which can be shared or not. I'm I'm going to push on one issue development, but I wonder if you have not neglected one part, um, and that was what was also asked. Is it not also the case that communities develop individuals through learning through a community, for instance, by carrying messages and so on? I mean, that part is not really something you focused on. I now understand you pushed a particular point, but it's also the case that the community can critically take individuals to other stages of themselves. I mean, the whole education system should work like that if it's not degenerative. So I was just wondering for your own theoretical development there
Mm.
that you perhaps also look at that side, how communities critique individuals. Communities can go wrong, but they can also go the right way. And there's another question there also for the other speakers. Basically, you speak of a better life. Do we know what the better life is? But we know that same-sex marriages will improve the condition of a lot of people. But I was just wondering if Professor Itova um, can tell us what a better life is. Do we know that? Is the concept of a philosophical concept of what is better? We know that the old Greeks tried to push for goodness, and until today we don't know what that is. But is perhaps a negative definition better as preventing us from harm? That would be just an open philosophical questions.
Thank you. Professor Matolino, please.
Thanks, Trump, for that question. Even value for the individual. The language. It's a long investment from the people. I think almost all of us on this platform, English is not our first language, it's a second language. The community invested in us to get us there, gave us other values, and we are indeed grateful for that. But this does not then suggest that the community is always progressive. Community works by consensus, and community works by also, as you say, I was pushing a particular point. Community works by pushing particular points, and and they may be positive in some senses, but in other senses they also need to be challenged. So I do appreciate the role of the community, and as far as the social and as far as the sociality of the self is concerned. But but the community also has moments where it represents wanting to maintain the status quo. Even the most open, even the most progressive of communities are also like that. Um, and one can see it in American democracy, for example. It is at a moment of degeneration. Yet there is serious pushback against anybody who wants to revise that democratic system. So that's where I think one has to be careful about the community, and one has to be careful about its mindset, what its primary commitments are. And I think communalistic commitments promote consensus to a degree that forbids probably innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Matolino. Please, Professor Tova, please, can you unmute yourself and respond?
Yeah, thank you, Abraham. It's a great question. My answer is rather brief. I understand better life as something that issues from development, or we develop towards a better life, a better something. Yeah, I don't really have a concept of better life. For me, better life is a psychological and political concept. So it is a better version of my life or the life of my community. So, for instance, if as a woman, I may consider gender equality better than lack of gender equality. Yeah. So in that sense, I would understand. I want to know what gender equality means. I want to experience it perhaps vicariously through literature, and then I can think of ways to implement it in real life, which can be legal, political, and psychological as well, mental, as Professor Matolino said. So I would say I don't have a very elaborate philosophical concept of better life, at least not at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. So there's still time for questions and contributions and comments. So
I can just come in and say the better life is that which makes life more tolerable. I do think life is a great disaster, really. If I had anything to do with it, I wouldn't have volunteered to come into existence. I mean, it's something that I had nothing to do with. So if we're talking about the better life, any concept that makes life more tolerable, particularly from what humans can contribute towards making each other experience this life in a more positive way, is a better life. Really, it's horrible, for example, to exist on the African continent because opportunities of making your life intolerable are generated on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. So before I take your question or contribution or comments, Azaya Negedu, I would like to ask Professor Richtova this question. So one of the criticisms against Afrofuturism is that Africa has immediate developmental problems like poverty and rest of them, corruption included, that should be dealt with than wasting so much energy in thinking about the future or wasting so much energy in trying to imagine 1,000 years from now what it will look like. So I want to actually know your take on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think my paper is an answer to that, the whole paper. So I think if you don't have futuristic imagination, you cannot think of development, as simple as that. So I think that Mbiti was right in saying that. He's often, I think many responses to Mbiti read him wrongly. I think he says so many interesting things about time and about thinking about the future, but he's mostly just taken by the word, criticized for banal statements that can be easily refuted. But I think this basic idea that to imagine development futurism. So the future is actually, we are not concerned about what will happen 200 years from now. That's not what Afrofuturism is about. Future is a commentary on the present condition and even on the past condition. You can even imagine a different past, right? You can also read your past differently. So actually, the scholars of Afrofuturism say that it's not about imagining the future, but about imagining a different present. So I would say it's not really, it doesn't matter where you project the future. That's why I also suggested you can project on another planet, right? I can imagine that right now on another planet, on some distant planet, there is a different, and that has been done, of course. There is another society which runs its things better, and I can write a novel about it, and that can be inspiring for what I do in the present or what I ask politicians to do and so on. So I think it's not really about 200 years from now. It's about imagining a different present, a different, better life, so to speak.
Thank you very much for your response. So, Negedo, I hope you are still here with us. Please unmute yourself, ask your question, or make your contribution.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to the presenters. And yeah, thanks to the presenters and thanks to the organizers here. My question is for Bernard. I was more concerned when he started his paper and he talked about development, mental development, which is different from material development. And I'm curious to know, it seems to me from what he said and from, of course, having a support from Joseph, that you can have mental development without material development. And what if that will be the case, what will then be the import of mental development if we don't see it tangibly? So, and is it also possible? Is it not also possible to have? It's actually material lack of material development always an offshoot of mental, lack of mental development. So my worry is that I'm thinking one should translate to the other. Mental should translate to tangible development, and if actually there is no tangible development or material development, is it the case that there is actually a lack of mental development? Thank you.
Maybe there's a small misunderstanding. The reason why I set up the paper the way I did is because in discourses of development, what one normally comes across is the language of measurement. So if you look at things like the GDP, income measurements per annum for individuals in a country, and development index, etc., it's always given to some kind of material measurement. And my argument is probably the reason why that material measurement fares so badly for Africa is because the primary stuff that should be concentrated on has not been attended to. And what is that primary stuff? It is a particular mental conditioning, which is consistent with what I would want to call the modern. And if there is that mental conditioning, or if there is attempts at moving towards such kind of mental commitments, then one may begin to see material development taking effect. That's why I talked about how the public space is treated, how things like how people are governed is viewed, how statecraft is viewed. All these things have got to be ideas first before they are implemented, and people have to be committed to those ideas. So it's almost going to be inevitable that you will have some kind of material progress if you have got the mental stuff going on correctly. However, the tricky part is that it's not always clear what that material development is going to look like, but it will happen. For example, I would want to think that the Greeks were once upon a time at the height of thinking, but they were not materially developed as we are. However, what one must appreciate is that they set off a certain type of thinking that influenced how human progress unfolded. That's my actual claim.
Thank you for your response. Please, let's keep our responses very brief. So Before I take the next question, I would like to ask Dr. Abo to please elaborate on his idea of development, how it can be applied to Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was going to quickly answer, especially from the point of the question asked by Isaiah. Isaiah Negedu, that he appears to have misunderstood us totally, because nobody is saying that material development is not important. We're only saying that our concentration on the materialism has actually been the major problem while we are not really developing. Because if you are mentally developed, then you can have material development. But materiality cannot bring about mental development. That's the point we are making. We're not saying that we should throw away material development. And because these things are all tied together, I am training my son in school because of today. Yeah, and I said, no, you can't bring my tomorrow here. What will I be looking for? What will I be looking for in the future? So I don't care whether the future we are talking about here is the future of tomorrow, 24 hours, or the future of 200 years. But the truth is that some of the things that are happening to us today is actually because we refuse to plan. A lot of people say if you don't, if you fail to plan, you will have planned to fail. So some of the things that are happening, so we must tie these things all together. Material development comes because, and Professor Bernard is saying that there are, because you didn't live, if you live Greece of the 15th century, if you compare the two worlds, you will now know that the world of 6th century BC is not the same world of today. Maybe you feel that this one is better because I'm sitting down here in Abakaliki, sitting down in Pretoria in South Africa, and what Prof was talking about better life, the betterment of life. Maybe we now think that life is actually better now because we can converse like this. Maybe yes, but also maybe no, because if you put all in this, is just like Professor Bernard have said, you just discover that it's not something that you can pin and give a percentage. Because I have asked him to give a percentage, but he's not able to do that because he knows that it is not really something that you give a percentage to. And so development for me, of course, I've had to discuss this severally. There are 3 dimensions. It's either you're going forward, or you are going, which is what we call progressive development, or you are going backwards. I call it regressive development. Or you may be circling in one place like the Israelites of Moses at Sinai. I call that one no development or stagnation. A lot of motion, but no movement. So until we are able to decide that we are not just planning for today, we are not just doing what we are doing for today, we are also doing it for tomorrow, then we will not be able to have couched or captured the development trajectory properly. So I don't think anybody should, make me not to think about tomorrow. I must think about tomorrow. Otherwise, we may have to delete the word hope from the dictionary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think with this, we have come to the end of this session. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all those that contributed to this section, and thank you to the audience. Right now, we'll be taking a 3 minutes break. We'll come back here by 1:43.